Let me ask you something strange. Imagine two people. Both of them just got $1,000 deposited into their bank account. One of them already has $500 in savings. The other one already has $20,000 sitting in their account. Same $1,000, same deposit, same day. But here's the thing, and this is what nobody talks about. Those two people didn't actually receive the same thing. Not really, not in any way that matters. Because money doesn't just sit in your account. Money does something to your brain. It changes how you think, how you decide, how you sleep at night, and most importantly, how you make your next move. And there is a very specific number, somewhere around $20,000, where everything about your relationship with money quietly shifts. Not dramatically, not overnight, but in a way that compounds quietly, in the background, until one day you look back and realize that number wasn't just a savings milestone, it was a psychological turning point. So today, we're going to break down exactly what changes after $20,000, why it changes, and most importantly, why understanding this shift might be the most important financial lesson you never got in school. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you're going to see money in a way you've never seen it before. Okay, so most people think about money in a pretty straightforward way. You earn it, you spend it, you try to save a little, you repeat. And if someone tells you to save money, the advice sounds simple enough. Spend less than you earn, put the rest away. Easy, done. But here's where almost everyone gets stuck, and I mean almost everyone, including people who are educated, smart, and genuinely trying to do the right things. They save a little. Maybe $200 here, $500 there. They build up a small cushion. And then life happens. The car breaks down, a medical bill shows up, a friend has a wedding out of town. And just like that, the savings disappear. And so the cycle restarts. Now, most financial influencers will tell you this is a discipline problem, that you just need better habits, better budgets, more willpower. But that's not the real story. The real story is that below a certain threshold of savings, your brain is operating in a completely different mode, a mode that makes it almost biologically difficult to build wealth. And that threshold? It's roughly around $20,000. Now, I'm not saying $20,000 is some magical number that fixes everything, but it sits at the center of a cluster of psychological and financial shifts that most people never even realize are happening. So let's break this down, step by step, from the very beginning. Part 1. The scarcity mindset. Let's start with something called scarcity mindset. There's actually a book on this, written by two researchers, an economist and a behavioral scientist, and what they found after years of studying people who struggle financially absolutely blew their minds. Here's the simple version. When you don't have enough money, when you're stressed about bills, when your bank account is uncomfortably low, your brain doesn't just feel stressed, it actually functions differently. Your focus narrows, you become hyper-aware of immediate financial threats, you start thinking short-term almost automatically. And here's the cruel part. This mental tunnel vision actually reduces your cognitive bandwidth, meaning you have less mental energy left over for planning, for creativity, for thinking about the future. It's like trying to run a bunch of apps on a phone that's almost out of storage. The phone technically still works, but it's slower, it glitches, it struggles. That's what financial stress does to the human brain. And this isn't about intelligence. This isn't about effort. It happens to smart, hard-working people every single day. Now here's where the $20,000 number starts to come in. Most financial experts recommend having 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved as an emergency fund. For many people in their 20s and 30s, that number lands somewhere between $10,000 and $25,000. But it's not just about the math, it's about what that money does to your psychology. When you have a real financial cushion, when you know that if something goes wrong, you have actual runway, something shifts in how your brain operates. The scarcity loop starts to quiet down. You start thinking more clearly. You start making decisions that are actually in your long-term interest. That's shift number 1, and it's bigger than most people realize. Part 2. The fear versus freedom switch. Let me give you a real-world example of what this looks like in practice. Imagine two people. Both are working jobs they don't love. Both of them have been thinking about starting a side hustle or maybe asking for a raise or maybe negotiating a better deal somewhere. Person A has $800 in their savings account. Person B has $22,000. Now, same opportunity comes up. Maybe there's a chance to take on a freelance project that would take up their weekends for 2 months. It's a bit risky. It might not pay off, but it could open some doors. Who do you think is more likely to take that chance? Person B, almost every time. And it's not because person B is braver or smarter or more ambitious. It's because they can afford to fail. If the project doesn't work out, they've still got $22,000 sitting there. The lights stay on, life continues, no catastrophe. But person A, if they spend their weekends on something uncertain and it doesn't pay off, they've lost time they could have spent on overtime or picking up extra shifts. The stakes feel completely different, because they are. This is what people mean when they say money makes money. It's not just about investment returns. It's about the fact that having a buffer gives you permission to take calculated risks. And taking calculated risks is literally how wealth is built. $20,000 isn't the exact number where this happens for everyone, but it's in the neighborhood. It's the range where the switch often flips from I can't afford to fail to I can afford to try. Part 3. The compounding effect on decisions. Now here's where this gets really interesting. We've all heard about compound interest, the idea that money grows on itself over time. You earn interest, and then you earn interest on that interest, and after a while, the numbers start snowballing. But there's another kind of compounding that nobody talks about. Decision compounding. Every financial decision you make either opens doors or closes them. Every good decision creates more options. Every bad decision, or even just every fear-based decision, narrows your path. And here's the brutal truth. When you're operating from a place of financial scarcity, most of your decisions are reactive. You're not choosing the best option. You're choosing the safest option available in the moment. That might mean staying in a job that underpays you because you can't afford to be between jobs for even a few weeks. It might mean not investing because every dollar feels like it could be needed tomorrow. It might mean saying no to a business idea because the startup cost feels like too much of a risk when your savings are thin. Each of these decisions isn't necessarily wrong in isolation, but over years, over a decade, the compound effect of defensive, scarcity-driven decisions can be enormous. Now flip it around. Once you cross that $20,000 threshold, once you have that cushion, you start making slightly different decisions. You might negotiate your salary instead of just accepting whatever's offered. You might put money into an index fund instead of keeping it all in a savings account with nearly no return. You might take the online course, invest in a tool that makes you more productive, or spend 3 months building something that could eventually generate passive income. These decisions compound too, just in the opposite direction.
Part 4. The invisible tax of being broke. There's a concept that economists talk about called the poverty premium, and once you understand it, you can't unsee it. Here's the idea. Being poor, or even just being cash-strapped, is actually more expensive than being financially comfortable. Sounds backwards, right? Let me explain. When you don't have savings, you can't buy in bulk because you don't have the cash up front, so you pay more per unit for groceries and household items. When your car breaks down and you don't have an emergency fund, you might have to put it on a credit card with 20% interest. Someone with savings just pays for the repair. No interest, no problem. When you don't have a cushion, you can't wait for the right apartment to come along. You have to take whatever you can afford right now, which often means a worse place at a higher price. When you live paycheck to paycheck, unexpected expenses trigger late fees, overdraft fees, or worse. Someone with savings just absorbs the hit. Now, add all of these little premiums up across a year, across 5 years, across a decade. The invisible cost of not having savings is enormous, and this is one of the most underappreciated reasons why the gap between people who struggle financially and people who build wealth tends to grow over time, even when their incomes are similar. $20,000 doesn't eliminate all of these costs, but it eliminates a huge chunk of them. Suddenly, you can make smarter purchasing decisions. You can shop around instead of grabbing whatever's in front of you. You can handle emergencies without going into debt, and you stop paying the invisible tax. The psychological identity shift. Okay, we've talked about the practical stuff, the decision-making, the compound effect, the hidden costs, but now I want to go a little deeper because I think this is the part that changes everything. When most people talk about financial goals, they focus entirely on the numbers. I want to save $10,000. I want to invest 15% of my income. I want to hit 6 figures. But here's what they miss. Money goals aren't really about the money. They're about identity. There's a version of you that is someone who struggles with money, and there's a version of you that is someone who is good with money. And these aren't just descriptions, they're identities. They shape how you behave, what you believe you deserve, and what you think is even possible for you. Here's the thing about identities. They're sticky. Once you adopt one, you start unconsciously behaving in ways that reinforce it. If you see yourself as someone who's just not good at saving, you'll find it really hard to save. Not because you can't, but because your behavior will keep matching your self-image. But here's the good news. Identities can shift, and they often shift around milestone moments. Reaching $20,000 in savings is one of those moments. For many people, it's the first time they've ever had a meaningful financial cushion, and something subtle but profound happens to how they see themselves. They start saying things like, "I'm someone who has savings. I'm someone who makes smart decisions with money. I'm someone who's building towards something." And once that identity starts to form, once you start seeing yourself as someone who is capable of managing money well, your behavior starts to align with it. Not perfectly, not overnight, but directionally. The $20,000 isn't just money in the bank, it's proof to yourself that a different financial life is possible for you specifically. The momentum effect. Let me tell you about a psychological phenomenon called the momentum effect. Here's how it works. When you're trying to build a new habit or reach a goal, the hardest part is almost never the middle. The hardest part is the very beginning, before you have any evidence that it's working, before you have any wins to point to, before you have any momentum. And this is true with money too. Going from zero savings to $1,000 is actually much harder than going from $1,000 to $5,000. Going from $5,000 to $10,000 is still tough, but once you've seen yourself save $10,000, there's a part of your brain that goes, "Okay, I can do this." And then something interesting happens around the $15,000 to $25,000 range for most people. The momentum starts to compound, because now you have enough that the money itself starts to help. Interest, even in a high-yield savings account, starts to show up on your statement in a meaningful way. Maybe you're putting money into index funds and you watch your portfolio tick up. You start seeing returns, real returns, money that you didn't earn by clocking in hours. And psychologically, that's a massive shift, because for most of your life, money only came from one place, trading your time for it. Hours in, dollars out. It felt like the only equation that existed. But then, suddenly, you see money creating money without you doing anything, and something clicks. Oh, this is how it works. This is what compound growth feels like from the inside.
And once you feel that, not just understand it intellectually, but actually feel it, your entire relationship with money transforms. Why most people never cross the threshold? Okay, so if the $20,000 range is such a powerful turning point, why don't more people reach it? Here's the honest answer. A combination of systemic factors and a really specific psychological trap. The systemic stuff is real. Wages that haven't kept up with the cost of living, rising housing costs, student debt. These are genuine headwinds that make saving harder than it used to be. I'm not going to pretend those don't exist. But here's the psychological trap that catches even people with decent incomes. Lifestyle inflation. Every time income goes up, a raise, a promotion, a bonus, there's an almost automatic pressure to upgrade your lifestyle. New car, nicer apartment, better vacations, more eating out. And individually, none of these upgrades seem like a big deal. You earned it, you deserve it. Life is short, right? But the math is ruthless. If your expenses grow every time your income grows, you never build the gap. You never create the runway. Your savings stay thin. Your financial cushion never develops. And you stay stuck in that reactive, scarcity-driven mode no matter how much you earn. This is why you see people making six figures living paycheck to paycheck. And it's not a character flaw. It's a trap. A really well-marketed, socially reinforced trap. The path out of that trap is creating and protecting the gap between what you earn and what you spend, at least long enough to build the cushion, long enough to cross the threshold. How to actually get there? So let's talk about what this looks like in practice. If you're not yet at that $20,000 range, or whatever your version of the financial cushion threshold looks like, the goal right now isn't to invest aggressively or to chase high returns or to optimize every dollar. The goal is to build the runway, because without the runway, you can't take off. Here's how to think about it in stages. Stage 1 is escape velocity. This is about getting to a point where you have a real emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. For most people, that's somewhere between $8,000 and $20,000, depending on where you live and your situation. During this stage, the priority is simple: protect the gap. Every extra dollar goes to savings. Lifestyle stays flat even if income rises. The focus is entirely on building the cushion. This stage might feel slow. It might feel like sacrifice. That's because it is, but it's temporary. Stage 2 is the transition. This is where you start to split your energy. Part of your savings goes to maintaining and growing your emergency fund. Part starts to go toward investments, index funds, retirement accounts, whatever makes sense for your situation. The cushion is established, so you can start thinking about growth. This is also the stage where the psychological shifts start to happen. You start thinking differently. You start making different decisions. The momentum builds. The stage 3 is when the compound effect takes over. Your investments are growing. You're earning returns. The gap between your income and your expenses is becoming increasingly irrelevant because your money is working alongside you. You have options. You have security. You have the freedom to take calculated risks that could... This is the stage most people think is only available to people who started with money or got lucky or had the right connections. But it's available to anyone who can build and protect the runway long enough to reach escape velocity. The one mental reframe that changes everything. Here's the single most important mindset shift I can give you. Stop thinking about saving money as giving something up. Start thinking about it as buying yourself something. Every dollar you save instead of spend isn't a sacrifice, it's a purchase. You're buying freedom. You're buying options. You're buying the version of yourself who gets to make decisions from a place of security instead of fear. Every $1,000 that goes into your savings account instead of a lifestyle upgrade is paying for your future self's ability to think clearly, to negotiate confidently, to take risks that could change the trajectory of your life. And that is not a cheap thing to buy. That is actually one of the most valuable things money can purchase. Here's what I want you to walk away with today. $20,000 is not the destination. It's the beginning of a completely different journey. Before that threshold, you're playing financial defense, reacting, surviving, managing emergencies, making decisions from a place of scarcity. And none of that is a personal failure. It's a predictable response to a genuinely difficult situation. But after that threshold, the game starts to change. Your brain starts to change. Your decisions compound differently. Your identity shifts. Your options multiply. And the momentum, once it builds, becomes increasingly hard to stop. The people who feel like money just works differently for them aren't special. They're not blessed with some secret financial knowledge. They crossed a threshold. They built the runway. And then they let the mathematics of compounding, both in their investments and in their decisions, do what it does. Now here's the thought I want to leave you with. The difference between where you are right now and where you want to be financially is not as wide as it feels. But it does require you to get honest about the gap between your income and your spending, the gap between the identity you have around money and the identity you want to have, and the gap between $20,000 and wherever your savings are sitting right now. Because once you close those gaps, Once you build the runway and reach that turning point, the version of you on the other side doesn't just have more money, they have more life. And that's worth working for.
Hello guys, thanks for watching for this video. Like, share and comment and subscribe for next video.